Just a nurse. That is what Dr. Caldwell said 14 minutes before Captain Marcus Torres crashed in room 347. Seattle General's ICU hums with the fluorescent buzz of overhead lights and the rhythmic beeping of a dozen monitors. The air tastes like disinfectant and stale coffee. Rachel Torres moves through the temp nurse pool like smoke, invisible, efficient, unremarkable. She has spent her entire career learning how to disappear, and a hospital in Atlanta is the perfect place to practice. Nobody asks questions about temp nurses. Nobody remembers their faces. That is exactly how she needs it. She pushes a med cart down the corridor, her movements economical and precise. 23 years of military service have taught her to conserve energy, to never waste emotion. Her scrubs are navy blue, standard issue, worn soft from 100 washings. Under the collar, hidden beneath 2 inches of fabric, her dog tags rest against her sternum. The metal is cold even through the fabric. She has stopped noticing it, the same way she stopped noticing the weight of the concealed pistol at her ankle 6 months ago when the Navy placed her here. Room 347 is her first assignment of the day. She has already been to rooms 319, 321, 325, and 330. She has checked oxygen saturation levels, documented medication times to the second, cross-referenced lab values. Her charting style is meticulous, the same precision that earned her 3 Navy Commendation Medals during night operations in San Juan Valley, Helmand Province. The precision of someone who understands that details save lives. Details also build evidence. Details create paper trails. That is why she is here. Not to save lives in operating rooms. To document the ones being lost in the ICU. But room 347 stops her at the doorway. The patient chart reads Captain Marcus Torres, USMC, age 41, admitted with multiple traumatic injuries, shrapnel wounds to thorax and abdomen, transferred from Bethesda Naval Medical Center 3 days ago. Her hands go completely still. She reads the name again. Reads it a 3rd time. Captain Marcus Torres. The same Captain Torres who led her son's unit in Marja. The same man whose voice came through her radio on the worst night of her life, calm and steady while IEDs shredded the perimeter of a forward operating base. The man who held her son's unit together when the mortars fell. Her breath catches. Just for a second. Just enough that she has to pause at the sync and count to 4, in and hold, out and hold. The old breathing technique from combat medicine. The one she taught recruits. The one she has not needed in 8 years. She does not tremble. Does not freeze. Does not allow the trembling to become visible. The trembling is restraint. It is the weight of recognition bearing down on her chest like a 200-pound sandbag, and she is holding it there with every muscle in her body because showing weakness here, in this moment, with this patient, is not an option. Rachel enters room 347. Captain Torres lies motionless on the hospital bed, sedated and intubated. A ventilator hisses its mechanical rhythm, in, out, like the breathing of something that does not have lungs of its own. His face is gaunt, hollowed by pain medication and days of unconsciousness. His left arm is wrapped in surgical dressing, thick and white. His right leg is immobilized in a splint. But his feet are still bare except for a pair of combat boots sitting on the window ledge beside a vase of flowers that died 3 days ago. The boots are worn. Scarred leather the color of old pennies. The soles are scuffed white at the edges from thousands of miles of walking through deserts and mountains. Rachel has seen boots like those before, everyone who has deployed has boots like those. But these are different. These are Marcus's lucky boots from deployment. He wore them at San Juan. He wore them the night her son's unit took incoming fire and Marcus's voice came through the radio, calm and steady and impossible to ignore. Rachel stands at the window and looks at those boots for longer than a nurse should. Her hand reaches toward them. She stops herself with an effort that costs something she cannot quite measure. She pulls her hand back. Smooths the blanket at the foot of the bed instead. Checks the oxygen saturation on the monitor, 94%, acceptable for a ventilated patient. Checks the fall lines, the catheter, the heart monitor. Checks everything twice because the precision of checking things twice keeps her from looking at the boots again. She documents everything in her methodical style. Time, vital signs, medication administered, respiratory status, pupil reactivity. The notes are meticulous. Obsessive. The kind of charting that would never draw a second glance from anyone looking at the chart, and would create a complete documentary record of exactly what happened in this room if anything were to go wrong. Her charting has already helped the Navy identify 3 suspicious deaths in this hospital. It is about to help identify a 4th. It is also about to make her a target. Dr. Caldwell arrives during rounds at 8:53 a.m. He is tall and lean, the kind of man who looks like he was born in a suit. His tie costs more than Rachel's monthly rent. His watch is gold and too new to have character. He enters room 347 without knocking, reads the monitor for 6 seconds without looking at the patient, then turns to Rachel with his eyebrows raised. "You are the temp, correct?" His voice is a tool designed for damage. Each word is precisely weighted. He speaks with the accent of someone who grew up in Connecticut or Massachusetts, somewhere with money and old names and the assumption that the world exists to serve him. "I need to see your notes from the overnight shift." "All of them." Rachel hands him the chart. She keeps her face blank. Her eyes down. Her posture slightly forward in a posture that suggests deference without apology. 16 years of playing civilian. 16 years of people like Dr. Caldwell looking at her and seeing nothing but another body in scrubs. He reads the charting for 30 seconds. His jaw tightens. He turns the chart toward her and points at an entry from 3:23 a.m. "This notation here. You wrote the medication was administered at 3:23. The 4-pump log shows 3:24. Which is it?" "Pump log is accurate, sir." Her voice is quiet. Respectful. The voice of a nurse who knows her place in the hierarchy. "I documented the time I prepared the medication. The pump recorded the time it was administered." "That is sloppy," Caldwell says. He says it loud enough that the nursing staff in the corridor can hear it. He says it like he is sharing an observation about the weather, casual and definitive. "Temp nurses are precisely why I have to triple-check everything that comes out of the ICU. Your lack of precision creates liability. It wastes my time. It wastes the hospital's resources." He hands the chart back without looking at her. He turns away as if she has already stopped existing. He has already moved his attention to Captain Torres on the bed, the human patient suddenly more interesting now that the incompetent nurse has been properly cut down to size. But Rachel is still standing there, and her jaw has tightened exactly 0.001 millimeters, and her hands remain steady as surgical steel, and her breathing stays at 8 breaths per minute because the trembling is information. The trembling is data. The trembling tells her exactly what she needs to know, and what she needs to know is when someone is trying to break her. Dr. Caldwell does not see it. He finishes his rounds at 9:02 a.m. and moves to the next patient. Rachel has already turned back to Captain Torres, her hands moving across the bed rail with the efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times. She does not cry. Does not retreat. Does not retreat to a supply closet or a bathroom stall or anywhere else where vulnerability might show. She stays present. She documents. She continues her work with the precision that has defined her entire career, and the only thing that shifts is the barely visible tightening of the muscles along her jaw. What she does not know is that Dr. Caldwell has already begun his strategic escalation. What she does not know is that 3 months ago, he started billing phantom consultations on ventilator patients, false charges, billing codes for services he never provided, money that went into accounts he opened specifically to hide it. What she does not know is that her charting style, the same meticulous documentation that earned her commendations in the Navy, is building a paper trail that could expose the pattern. What she does not know is that Dr. Caldwell has already decided she is a problem that needs to be solved. But that is not the worst part. Not yet. The worst part comes when the intercom crackles at 10:31 a.m. and a voice says code blue, room 347, and Rachel is the only one close enough to reach the crash cart in time. At 10:24 a.m., Rachel is at the vending machine. She has 30 seconds of break time, barely time to get coffee before she needs to be back on the floor. The hospital vending machine dispenses coffee that tastes like burnt plastic and regret, but it is better than nothing. She is alone except for Dr. Caldwell, who appears at her shoulder like a man who has been waiting for exactly this moment when no one else is in earshot. "I need to ask you something," he says. His voice is pitched low, conversational, the tone of someone sharing a private concern. "Have you ever worked critical care before, or did the temp agency send you here straight from some clinic in the suburbs?" 3 years at Naval Hospital Bethesda. The lie comes out smooth and practiced. Close enough to the truth that it will not break apart under scrutiny. Surgical ICU. Bethesda, he repeats, as if tasting the word. As if measuring her against something in his mind and finding her wanting. That is interesting. Because the way you chart suggests someone who has never worked in a real hospital. Your medication administration times are off by a minute. Your notation style is inconsistent. And frankly, your clinical judgment seems pedestrian. Rachel does not respond. She retrieves her coffee from the machine. The cup is hot enough to burn if she does not hold it carefully. She holds it carefully. "I am trying to understand," Caldwell continues, "whether you genuinely do not understand basic protocols, or whether you simply do not care." He pauses. He is waiting for her to defend herself. He wants her to fight back because fighting back means showing emotion, and showing emotion means he can push harder. Because if temp nurses like you do not understand the difference between precision and approximation, then you should not be in the ICU. You should be working the ER handing out band-aids to people who cut their fingers on paper. The vending machine hums. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry wasps. Rachel drinks her coffee. It tastes exactly as bad as she expected. "Is there anything else, doctor?" Her voice is steady. Quiet. The voice of someone who has already accepted the nature of her situation. "Just remember that I am watching now," Caldwell says. He says it like a promise. One more incident. That is all it will take. He walks away before she can respond. Rachel stands alone in front of the vending machine and allows herself exactly 4 seconds of something that might be anger, might be fear, might be the combination of both that keeps people alive in situations where staying alive requires remaining absolutely still while someone tries to destroy them. Then she straightens her shoulders. She finishes her coffee. She returns to room 347 where Captain Marcus Torres is sleeping sedated and breathing through a machine and wearing boots that survived a war so that their owner could tell her son what it meant to be a good officer. She has no idea what is about to walk through those doors. She has no idea that 8 hours from now, everything will change. She has no idea that in 12 days, a helicopter will land on the hospital roof. She knows only that the trembling is restraint. Knows only that precision saves lives. Knows only that she has come too far, sacrificed too much, hidden too much of herself away to fail now. The boots sit on the window ledge. The ventilator hisses its mechanical song. And Rachel Torres continues her work, invisible and efficient and utterly unstoppable, waiting for the moment when the truth becomes impossible to hide. The ventilator hisses its mechanical song. And Rachel Torres continues her work, invisible and efficient and utterly unstoppable, waiting for the moment when the truth becomes impossible to hide. But that moment isn't here yet. First comes the humiliation. 9 o'clock. Grand rounds. 12 residents and 4 attending physicians crowd the nurse's station like sharks circling prey. The smell of antiseptic and fresh coffee mingles with something else, the sharp ozone scent of too many bodies in too small a space. Rachel stands 3 feet from the gathering, her hands clasped in front of her, chart tucked under one arm. She wears the mask she's perfected over 16 years of active duty, a neutral. Present. Invisible. Dr. Caldwell holds up her charting on Captain Marcus Torres like he's presenting evidence at trial. The paper catches the fluorescent light. His voice is the kind that carries, practiced, performative, designed to be heard not just by the residents but by everyone within 20 feet of the station. This, he announces, is what happens when temp agencies send us their overflow. Note the excessive detail here. Each breathing treatment documented to the minute. Ventilator settings at 08 for 7 hours. Mode change at 1203 hours. Suctioning events logged by time and secretion volume. He turns a page slowly, deliberately. This isn't literature class, Nurse Torres. It's called efficiency. The residents smirk. One of them, a third-year resident with the arrogance that only comes from never having been truly tested, actually laughs. Rachel's jaw tightens. The movement is imperceptible, the kind of micro-expression most people miss entirely. But Caldwell sees it. He's looking for it. He wants to see it. Perhaps at your previous facility, he continues, his tone dripping with condescension, wherever that was, they had time for novellas in the margins. He holds the chart higher, making a show of it. But here at Seattle General, we value documentation that reflects standard practice, not a nursing student's thesis project. Rachel's eyes remain fixed on a point just past his shoulder. Not looking at him. Not looking away either. There's a difference, and it matters. Her hands don't shake. Her breathing doesn't change. She stood in the back of a CA-17 Globemaster flying into hostile territory with more noise and chaos than this break room will ever generate. She's held pressure on wounds while mortars fell 300 meters out. This is performance, and she's perfected it. Caldwell waits. Seconds stretch like pulled taffy. The residents exchange glances, some uncertain now, some still smirking. One of the attending physicians coughs into his elbow. Rachel meets Caldwell's eyes for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to acknowledge the assault, not long enough to challenge it, then turns and walks toward room 347. At 1203 hours, she's in the medication room, counting controlled substances. The plastic bins are organized in precise rows. Each syringe labeled. Each vial accounted for. The work is methodical, mathematical, the same way she approached every inventory count in the Navy. Pain is data. Documentation is survival. Numbers don't lie. The break room. 1,400 hours. Rachel reaches for a coffee from the vending machine when Caldwell appears beside her like a conjured thing. His voice is loud enough for the break room to hear, loud enough that the 2 nurses at the corner table stop their conversation and turn. Do temp nurses even understand basic protocols, or do you all just wing it? A nurse tech giggles, a small, nervous sound that dissolves quickly. Rachel inserts her dollar bill. The machine hums and whirs. The coffee falls with a hollow mechanical thud. She presses the button for cream. The sound of liquid dispensing fills the silence. Caldwell is still standing there, close enough that she can smell his cologne, something expensive and aggressive, the olfactory equivalent of his voice. "I asked you a question," he says. She retrieves her coffee. The cup is warm between her palms. Not hot enough to hurt. She meets his eyes again, 2 seconds, maybe less. Then she walks past him toward the door. The cup doesn't rattle. Her hands don't betray her. But something shifts in the break room air. The nurse tech stops giggling. At 1,600 hours, Caldwell corners her at the medication cart on the ICU floor. The ventilators hum their mechanical chorus. Monitors beep in synchronized patterns. Around them, the ICU operates with the precision of a well-oiled machine, beds, tubes, lines, fluids, medications, each element vital, each element tracked. Rachel is counting the morphine vials when he appears at her shoulder. This time his voice is lower, almost confidential, which somehow makes it worse. "There's a discrepancy in the morphine count from your shift yesterday." He lets that hang. 3 milligrams. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a documentation error. Maybe it's something else entirely. Security will escort you out if there's one more incident. He pauses. "I'd hate to see that happen, but I have protocols to follow." Her jaw clenches. One micro-expression. Tighter this time. More visible. She can feel it, the tension traveling up through her masseter muscle, the kind of physical response that 3 months of meditation training usually prevents. But she allows herself this moment. Just this moment. She nods once. Professional. Controlled. Then she returns to room 347. The door closes behind her with a soft hydraulic sigh. Inside, the ventilator continues its mechanical rhythm. Captain Marcus Torres lies on the bed with the stillness of the critically injured, body present, consciousness somewhere distant, suspended between recovery and the abyss. The combat boots sit on the window ledge where they've been since yesterday, worn leather creased with the shape of his feet, salt stains marking the missions they've walked. Desert operations. Mountain terrain. The mountains of Marja. Rachel's son served under Marcus. Marja Battalion, 3rd Platoon. She knows the geography of her son's service the way most mothers know their child's school schedule. She's memorized the terrain. The threat assessments. The casualty reports. And when Marcus's name appeared in her patient assignment yesterday, she allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of something that wasn't quite prayer and wasn't quite hope, sitting alone in the supply closet with her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat stabilize beneath her fingers. She draws the curtain now. The gesture is automatic, part of the ritual of patient care, privacy, security, the small dignity of isolation. Only after the curtain closes does her hand tremble against the bed rail. Just for a moment. Just enough that she feels it, a tremor running through her fingers like a current. Her other hand presses down on the rail, grounding herself. Her breathing deepens. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The tremor subsides. Outside, in the ICU, Caldwell walks past her station. He doesn't stop. But he watches. At 2,300 hours, the parking garage beneath Seattle General is nearly empty. Her car is a silver Honda Civic, unremarkable, the kind of vehicle that disappears into crowds. She sits in the driver's seat with the dome light on, the overhead illumination casting her in stark relief, face sharp, eyes steady, hands resting on her lap. The second phone is military issue, encrypted, the kind that has a single purpose, secure communication with her handler. A text message waits, Master Chief, any update on the ventilator pattern? She types back carefully, Caldwell altered 3 charts this week. Patient deaths cluster around his weekend shifts. Phantom consultations on 17 ventilators. All deceased. Need 2 more weeks for pattern confirmation. The hospital had brought her in for this. 6 months embedded at Seattle General, investigating a cluster of ICU deaths that the federal investigators suspected was something darker than statistical coincidence. The Navy had classified the operation, a quiet investigation into a potential healthcare fraud scheme spanning 18 months. She was placed here as a temp nurse specifically because her background was clean enough to pass cursory vetting but buried deep enough that Caldwell's network couldn't uncover her real affiliation. Master Chief Petty Officer Rachel Torres. 12 years of active service. 3 tours. 2 Purple Hearts. A Navy Cross she keeps folded in a lockbox that even her son doesn't know about. Her handler's response comes through, maintain cover. Do not engage. 2 more weeks. That's the timeline. She deletes the conversation. Both phones. Clean. No trace. She deletes the photograph she took from the records room, 17 images of Caldwell's patient files, phantom consultations documented, billing codes that don't match legitimate procedures, a paper trail that contradicts her meticulous charting by design. Her documentation is a mirror. Whatever he did, her precision records show exactly what should have been done. He's noticed that precision. That's why he's escalating. She returns to the ICU at midnight. The night shift has reduced the floor to essential personnel, 2 nurses, 1 tech, 1 resident sleeping in the call room. The monitors glow like constellations. The ventilators maintain their steady hiss and click. And on her locker, written on a sticky note in Caldwell's aggressive handwriting, "See me before your next shift." Caldwell. But she doesn't read that note yet. First, she goes to room 347. Captain Marcus Torres hasn't changed, still unconscious, still circling the boundary between recovery and something worse. The machines do the work his body can't do yet. The ventilator breathes for him. The 4 drips deliver hydration and nutrition. The cardiac monitor shows the electrical rhythm of his heart, steady, organized, the pattern of a man who hasn't given up yet. She sits beside his bed for 5 minutes. Just 5. It's the vulnerability she allows herself. Her hand rests on the bed rail. Her eyes close for a moment. She thinks of Mateo, her 16-year-old son, who served 3 years ago with the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Who wrote home about his commanding officer, a Marine named Torres, a man who led with precision and purpose and a code that transcended survival. Her son came home. 2 of his brothers in arms didn't. Captain Marcus Torres was the reason the losses weren't worse. The reason Mateo still breathes. She donated 2 units of O-negative blood when Marcus arrived. The ER was chaos, trauma activation, multiple for access, the controlled frenzy of the operating room before the operating room. She'd already given blood for the hospital supply weeks earlier. When they called for additional units and she heard his name, she volunteered before she could think about the complications. 2 units. Not an unusual donation. Nothing that would flag the system or raise questions. Just a temp nurse helping save a life. She returns to the nurse's station at 0030 hours. The note remains on her locker. What happened next didn't just change everything, it created the pressure point that would either shatter her cover or expose the truth about Dr. Caldwell in a way that no investigation could contain. But she doesn't know that yet. She only knows that she has 2 more weeks to maintain this performance. 2 more weeks to remain invisible and methodical and utterly unstoppable while the man who is trying to destroy her tries to understand why his cruelty isn't working. The ones who have seen the worst often give the most. 11 p.m. in the hospital parking garage, dome light casting shadows across Rachel's face as her encrypted phone buzzed against the steering wheel. Not the civilian burner, the secure line. The one that connected her to NCIS handlers 3,000 miles away at Naval Station Norfolk. She didn't reach for it immediately. In her line of work, delayed responses saved lives. The message came through in military timestamp format, 2,300 hours. Operation Persistence Authorization confirmed. You are Master Chief Petty Officer Rachel Torres, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Assignment: Seattle General ICU. Objective: investigate suspicious patient mortality pattern. Classified duration: 6 months. Cover identity: civilian temp nurse, widow status, 3 years county experience. Do not break cover under any circumstances. She had Mima eyes that messaged the day she arrived. 6 months. 183 days spent charting with the precision of someone who'd once documented casualty reports in forward operating bases, watching for inconsistencies in medication counts that didn't make sense, noting which ventilator patients died shortly after Dr. Caldwell ordered specific consultations that never appeared in billing records until weeks later. Phantom consultations. Ghost procedures. Money moving through accounts like water through a sieve, and Caldwell at the center of it all, protected by layers of hospital administration and board members who'd learned long ago that it was safer to look the other way. The secure phone buzzed again. Handler following your situation. Do not compromise mission. Status. She typed back slowly, thumb moving with deliberate care across the encrypted keyboard, still embedded. Patient critical. Will maintain position. She set the phone down. Waited. The response came in less than 10 seconds. Understood. Secure perimeter. The next morning, the fluorescent lights of Seattle General hummed with that particular frequency that only hospitals produced, a sound like the building itself was holding its breath. Rachel was in the ICU, checking the ventilator settings on room 347, her hands moving with the automatic confidence of someone who'd done this in sand-blown field hospitals while mortars fell outside. Captain Marcus Torres lay unconscious, oxygen flowing, the machines keeping him tethered to life. She was so focused on the foredrip that she didn't hear Dr. Caldwell enter until his shadow fell across the bed. Rachel. Not Ms. Torres. Not even the backhanded temporary employee. Just her first name, said the way a predator says the name of wounded prey. She turned. His jaw was tight. His eyes had that particular shine they got when he'd been making phone calls, burning through favors, cashing in years of accumulated leverage. The combat boots still sat on the window ledge. She'd left them there deliberately, not as a memorial, but as a fact. A detail to document. A physical marker of who this patient truly was. "We need to talk," Caldwell said. "My office. Now." "It's not a request." His office smelled like leather and expensive cologne and something else underneath, the faint chemical scent of anxiety mixed with antiseptic. Rachel sat across from the desk and kept her posture military straight without appearing military. Deferential. Tired. Just a temporary nurse who'd gotten the wrong assignment. Caldwell slid a folder across the desk like he was dealing cards in a game he'd already won. "I've been reviewing your personnel file," he said. "And I'm troubled by what I'm finding." The folder was thin. Too thin. "You worked 3 years in county hospitals. But your documentation style is unusual. Overly detailed. Methodical in ways that suggest training most nurses don't receive." He was fishing. Caldwell was good, but he wasn't good enough to recognize military-grade documentation protocol just by looking at it. "I'm thorough," Rachel said. Her voice came out soft. Apologetic. The voice of someone afraid of losing a job she needed. "I understand hospital policy requires, that's not the issue," Caldwell interrupted. He stood, began pacing like a prosecutor working a jury. "Yesterday, I contacted the state nursing board about you. Just a routine inquiry. Very discreet." He wasn't going to say anything concrete because he couldn't. Her cover identity was solid, her credentials were solid, everything her handlers had built was solid. "They confirmed your licensure. But I also made some calls to the staffing agency that placed you here. Mentioned some concerns. Prior disciplinary issues. Patterns of behavior that worried me." He was lying. There were no prior issues. But he was also telling the truth about making calls. That was the dangerous part. "I've also spoken directly with the nursing director and 3 members of our board. Shared my observations about your documentation practices and your involvement in the Torres case." Rachel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "They're concerned. Concerned enough that I've asked for an external risk management consultant to review your recent work. That's happening tomorrow. 9 a.m. The words landed like rounds downrange. Rachel understood what had just happened. Caldwell hadn't fabricated evidence, he'd activated something far more dangerous. He'd activated his network. Board members who owed him favors for years of looking the other way when their own numbers didn't add up. Administrators he'd helped shuffle budget problems through accounting channels. A consultant who'd be predisposed to find problems because consultants always find problems, that's how they justify their fees. Her cover story could survive scrutiny from a single source. It could survive one hospital director's questioning. But under sustained investigation from multiple vectors, with investigators actively looking for inconsistencies, comparing notes, digging through records, the widow narrative would crack. The 3-year county hospital experience would show gaps. Someone would find something that didn't quite fit because her real experience was classified, buried in systems that didn't exist on paper. "I want to be fair," Caldwell continued, sitting back down and leaning forward in a gesture that was supposed to look reasonable. "One more incident. One more patient complication or documented concern. And I will have security escort you out of this hospital. I won't have a choice. The liability becomes ours." He wasn't threatening her directly. That was what made him competent. He was stating a fact. Hospital policy. Administrative procedure. Unfortunate but necessary. Rachel met his eyes. Held them. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. Didn't speak. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. He waited for anger. For fear. For some crack in her composure that would confirm he'd won this round. What he got instead was nothing. Just a steady gaze and a jaw that didn't tremble. Just breathing. Normal. Measured. The kind of calm that comes from having already survived the absolute worst. Is there anything else? She asked quietly. Not a question. A dismissal. Caldwell's eye twitched. By 3 p.m., an administrator Rachel had never seen before was standing in the ICU, tablet in hand, asking to speak with her privately. The woman's name was Janet Sinclair and she moved like someone executing a predetermined checklist. I need to verify your employment history, she said, reading from her screen. The staffing agency that placed you here. Did you provide current contact information for your previous employers? Rachel answered each question exactly as her handlers had trained her. Names. Addresses. Phone numbers that connected to an elaborate network of voicemail systems and email addresses that traced back to civilian staffing contractors. The story was airtight because the contractors were real, they were legitimate, and they were fully briefed to confirm everything if asked. Rachel watched Sinclair's face and saw the woman's disappointment. This was supposed to be easier. This was supposed to be the moment where the inconsistencies revealed themselves. Instead, everything checked out. For now. That night, at 11:56 p.m., Rachel sat in her car again, same parking garage, same dome light, and texted the secure line, network activated. Caldwell has contacted board members, nursing director, and external consultant. Cover under investigation. Recommend extraction. The response came in 40 seconds. Cannot extract. Operation still critical. Can you maintain cover? She looked up at the hospital, at the light still burning in the ICU on the 5th floor. At the window where combat boots were sitting in the darkness. Marcus Torres's vitals had been stable for 18 hours. His oxygen saturation was climbing. He might make it. If she stayed. If she kept working his case. If she fought the infection that was trying to set in and the complications that always came after trauma this severe. But if she stayed, if she continued this work, her cover would fail. The consultant would find something. The board members would demand deeper investigation. Someone would connect dots that shouldn't be connected. 6 months of investigation into Caldwell's phantom billing scheme, proof of fraud involving 8 different physicians across 4 departments, nearly $847,000 in fabricated charges, and patient outcomes that showed a pattern of complications in cases where he'd inserted himself into treatment protocols. All of it would evaporate the moment her classified status was exposed. She typed back, will not extract. Patient critical. Mission secondary. The response was immediate. Understood. Handler will coordinate with command. Stay sharp. Rachel set the phone down. Looked at her hands. They were steady. They'd held medics' instruments in Marja while rounds came through walls made of mud and sandbags. They'd been steady then too. They were steady now. But she knew what was coming. Caldwell wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stop. Because she represented something he couldn't control. A person with integrity. A documentation style that would eventually expose him. A woman who wouldn't flinch. And the consultant arriving at 9 a.m. would be his next move. 2 a.m. The ICU hummed its mechanical lullaby, ventilators wheezed, monitors beeped in staggered rhythm, fluorescent lights cast everything in the color of exhaustion. Rachel Torres stood at the nurse's station reviewing the chart on Marcus Torres when his monitor screamed. Not beeped. Screamed. The kind of alarm that made every nerve ending wake up at once. Room 347. His room. She was moving before her brain caught up. The hallway stretched and compressed at the same time, a phenomenon that happened in crisis, where distance became theoretical. Her badge clattered against her sternum. Boots on tile. 1, 2, 3, 4. The older night nurse, Patricia, was already there, but Rachel knew before she crossed the threshold what she would find. Ventricular fibrillation on the monitor. Blood pressure undetectable. A man in his 50s circling the drain. Dr. Marcus Whitmore stood frozen at the foot of the bed. 3 months out of residency. 26 years old. Brilliant on anatomy exams and completely liquefied in the presence of actual dying. His hands hung at his sides like useless tools someone had forgotten to pack away. Marcus Torres's chest was already open from the previous surgery, his sternum plated, his ribs accessible, the surgical sites held together with tape and hope. Rachel's eyes locked on the open cavity. 1 second to assess. 1 second to decide. She had seen 3 men die in a field hospital outside Marja because the surgeon froze. Their faces had not left her in 14 years. Thoracotomy tray, Rachel said. Her voice had dropped an octave. Not a request. Not a question. A command that carried the weight of someone who had been giving them in actual war zones. Patricia moved. Dr. Whitmore stared. Now, Rachel added, and Patricia was already reaching for the tray on the crash cart, her muscle memory responding to an authority that had nothing to do with hospital hierarchy. Rachel pushed past Whitmore without looking at him. She snapped on fresh gloves, the latex crackled like gunshots in the compressed silence of the room. The smell hit her, antiseptic and blood and the particular metallic copper of a man bleeding out. She had missed this smell. That realization would come later. Right now there was only the work. She cracked his chest open with practiced precision. The ribs spread under her hands like a familiar prayer. His heart lay there in front of her, not beating, looking like something that had already decided to quit. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers found the heart muscle and began the massage, direct, rhythmic, the only thing between Marcus Torres and a body bag. In and out. Squeeze and release. The motion came from somewhere deeper than muscle memory. It came from being 24 years old in a field hospital with mortar rounds shaking the roof and 3 men who needed her hands more than they needed oxygen. Push epi, Rachel said. Patricia was already drawing it up, understanding now that this woman in the temporary nurse badge knew exactly what she was doing. 1 milligram 4, Patricia confirmed, and the drug went in. Rachel's hands moved inside Marcus's chest cavity, feeling the organ respond, feeling it start to contract on its own, feeling the moment when the body decided to keep fighting. The monitor showed electrical activity. Disorganized at first, then organizing. Then a rhythm. A heartbeat. Real. Present. Alive. 30 seconds of chest compressions. 60 seconds if you were lucky. Rachel had done it in 90 seconds once, in a tent outside Fallujah, and the Marine she brought back had lived another 43 years. She would find that out later, through the classified channels. Not now. Now there was only the work and the rhythm and the moment when Marcus Torres's blood pressure climbed back into the range where humans could survive. His back, Patricia whispered. Not a statement. A prayer answered. Rachel held his sternum for 3 more beats. She could feel his heart beneath her fingers, strong now, insistent, refusing to be quiet. She withdrew her hand slowly, deliberately, and stepped back. Her gloves were soaked in blood that looked black under the OR lights. Her heart was still hammering against her ribs like it wanted out. Dr. Whitmore stared at her. His mouth worked but no sound came out. Patricia was already grabbing the chest tray, beginning to close, her movements efficient and reverent. Where did you learn that? Whitmore finally managed. His voice sounded like a teenager asking his father why the sky was blue. Rachel pulled off her gloves, 1 finger at a time. The latex peeled away clean, inside out, efficient. She dropped them into the biohazard bin without looking at him. Trauma rotation, she said. Her face was carved from stone. No emotion. No revelation. Just a tired temporary nurse who had happened to have a useful skill set. But something in Whitmore's eyes had changed. He was looking at her differently now, the way people looked at things they didn't understand but suddenly feared. By 8 a.m., Caldwell had made 6 phone calls. Rachel knew this because Patricia told her during the morning shift change, her voice low and concerned. He's been on the phone since he got in. Talking to people. Sounded angry. By 9 a.m., the external risk management consultant arrived, a woman named Sarah Chen with a clipboard and the polite smile of someone about to destroy your career. She requested Rachel's employment file, her vaccination records, her references. The nursing director, Patricia Olson, looked apologetic but resolute. We need to review the incident from last night, Chen said. They sat in a small office with no windows. Dr. Caldwell has expressed serious concerns about scope of practice. Rachel said nothing. Composure meant knowing when words were ammunition the other side could use. He documented that you performed a thoracotomy without physician authorization. That's outside a nurse's scope. Chen's voice was professional, interested, the way investigators sounded when they already knew the answer to the question they were asking. Can you explain where you learned that procedure? Field medical training, Rachel said. The truth, technically. Just not the complete truth. Chen made a note. Military. Civilian trauma course. Another note. The lie sat between them like a third person in the room. By 10 a.m., the nursing director asked Rachel to come to her office. Patricia would not meet her eyes in the hallway. By noon, security stood at the locker room door. Rachel packed her personal items into a cardboard box, her extra scrubs, her phone charger, the worn leather badge holder she'd bought in San Diego in 2003. The box was light. She had spent for months carrying almost nothing. Your contract is terminated effective immediately, the security guard said. His name was Robert. He had smiled at her in the break room exactly once, 3 weeks ago. We'll mail your final check. You can't return to the building without written authorization from administration. The walk out through the main lobby took 40 seconds. 40 seconds of being watched by people whose faces she would forget within a week. Dr. Caldwell stood near the front desk, his arms crossed, his expression satisfied in the way of men who had just won a game where no one else knew the rules. Rachel didn't look at him. She carried the cardboard box like a shield and let the automatic doors spit her back out into the Georgia heat. By 3 a.m., she sat alone in a diner called the Golden Rooster on Route 42, the only place open at that hour that didn't serve alcohol or require an ID check. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Her reflection in the dark window looked like something that had been broken and reassembled but not quite right. The concealed service pistol pressed against her ankle, a reminder that she was supposed to be a soldier but couldn't even protect a single mission. 6 months of work. 3 suspected cases of Caldwell's phantom billing. Not enough. Never enough. The case was incomplete. And Marcus Torres was still in that hospital with a man who had just eliminated the person who was actually investigating him. She had failed. That was the only truth that mattered now. She had failed, and there was no one to tell, and by tomorrow the external consultant would close the case with a note about overzealous documentation and a temporary nurse who didn't understand protocol. The waitress refilled her cup anyway. Rachel watched the steam rise and dissipate like a prayer that nobody was listening to. Outside, an 18-wheeler rumbled down Route 42 headed toward Birmingham. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights and the tick of a broken clock on the wall were the only sounds in the universe. She sat there as the night pressed in, as the weight of her weapon reminded her she was armed but powerless, as the coffee grew cold again and she did not drink it. What she didn't know was that her son had been calling Seattle General's main line every hour since 2 a.m. What she didn't know was that someone had picked up. What she didn't know was that a 16-year-old boy had found a shadow box in his mother's closet and was making a decision that would change everything. The conference room at Seattle General fell silent when the board chairman gavelled the emergency session to order. 18 members. 2 FBI agents standing near the back. And one empty chair where Dr. Caldwell had sat 20 minutes earlier before excusing himself to take a call. The Torres family's legal threat had been explicit: file charges or they would. A Marine general didn't make idle promises. Board members shifted in their seats, calculating liability, already distancing themselves from whatever came next. The chairman cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the termination of Rachel Torres and the circumstances surrounding." The conference room door opened. A 16-year-old boy stood in the doorway, his voice steady but trembling at the edges. "Mom, they need to see these." Mateo Torres held a shadow box against his chest like armor. The room didn't move. Nobody understood yet what they were looking at, just a kid in a school blazer holding something that looked like a frame. The chairman started to speak. General Vincent Torres, who had flown in from Quantico overnight, stood instead. He looked at his grandson. Then he looked at the shadow box. His jaw tightened. Mateo stepped into the room and opened the case against the polished conference table. Bronze star. Silver star. 2 purple hearts. And beneath them all, a Navy cross on its ribbon the color of blood and sky. The room went absolutely still. A Vietnam-era security guard, 73 years old, 45 years at Seattle General, the kind of man who faded into hallways and never said much, came to attention at the doorway. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Master Chief on deck." He saluted the empty space beside the shadow box, the formal recognition of rank transcending everything else: titles, hospitals, politics. The board members didn't understand military courtesy. They understood its weight. General Torres leaned forward. He was a large man, shaped like the men who make decisions about war, and his hands trembled as he lifted the Navy Cross citation from the shadow box. When he began reading, his voice was steady but fractured at the edges, the way a man's voice breaks when he's reading about someone else's child holding ground that shouldn't have been held. Master Chief Petty Officer Rachel Torres, for extraordinary heroism in combat operations, Marja, Helm and Province, 2011. While serving as senior medical officer with Charlie Platoon, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, during a Taliban assault on forward operating base Shank. He paused. His hand moved to his uniform jacket. She held a defensive perimeter with 3 wounded Marines while calling in medevac under sustained small arms fire. 37 minutes. That's how long she stood her ground. That's how long she kept soldiers alive who would have died. The general's voice dropped to something quieter and more dangerous. "That's how my son learned what leadership meant." The conference room door opened again. Captain Marcus Torres wheeled himself into the room, oxygen cannula running beneath his nose, his body still soft with recovery but his eyes sharp as a blade. The room shifted. This was the patient. This was the Marine who had been terminated for. This was the reason everyone was here. Marcus looked directly at the board chairman. When he spoke, his voice was the kind that had given orders in hostile territory. "I don't remember most of my time in room 347. The ventilator does that, takes the days and leaves you with nothing but white noise and pain signals. But I remember this: Master Chief Torres donated O-negative blood before her shift even started." He wheeled closer to the table. "She never mentioned she knew me. She never mentioned she recognized my name from deployments. She never asked for anything. Not a thank you. Not acknowledgement. She just showed up." Marcus looked at Mateo. And apparently her 16-year-old knew something his mother didn't think was worth mentioning. The FBI agent stepped forward. The room recognized the movement, handcuffs on his belt. Federal insignia, the kind of authority that made hospital administrators pull their hands off the table like it was burning. "We need to discuss Dr. Caldwell's billing practices over the past 18 months. The agent opened a laptop. Charts appeared on the wall screen, phantom consultations, dates with no corresponding treatment notes, patterns that looked like statistical ghosts. Master Chief Torres's charting wasn't substandard. It was coded military documentation. Every flagged entry she made corresponded to a deceased patient. Every inconsistency she noted connected to billing irregularities. She was building a case. The second FBI agent held up a document. We also recovered fabricated personnel records filed yesterday, attempting to justify her termination retroactively. That's wire fraud on top of healthcare fraud. That's falsifying federal documents. The conference room door swung open a third time. Dr. Caldwell stood in the threshold, the color draining from his face in real time as he understood what had happened. His mouth opened. His eyes moved from the shadow box to the general to the FBI agents. He took a step backward. This is insane. I'm a department head. I have board members who, the board members he was counting on were already sliding their chairs back, creating distance measured in millimeters but understood perfectly. The consultant he had brought in yesterday, the one who was supposed to rubber stamp his termination of Rachel, was opening her laptop. I documented everything, she said quietly. Your emails. Your request for fabricated findings. I contacted federal authorities. The handcuffs clicked around Caldwell's wrists with a sound like finality. His face went from white to red in stages, like a medical chart showing declining vitals. You can't, I have lawyers, this hospital will be sued into. General Torres stepped forward. His voice was quiet. It was the quietest thing in the room. That was what made it deadly. My son could have died because you were too busy covering fraud to ensure adequate staffing. A Master Chief Petty Officer, a decorated combat veteran with 3 Navy Commendation Medals and a Marine who owes her his life, was escorted out by security while you billed Medicare for consultations you never performed. The FBI agent began the recitation. Healthcare fraud. Wire fraud. Insurance fraud. Falsifying federal documents. 18 months of phantom billing. 23 deceased patients with suspicious documentation patterns across his service records. The numbers accumulated like artillery fire. Caldwell's face cycled through expressions: rage, confusion, denial, the expressions of a man watching his network evaporate in real time. The board members who had taken his calls, who had owed him favors, who had promised support, were suddenly claiming they barely knew him. Administrators were producing emails where they questioned his billing practices. Colleagues were remembering concerns they'd never voiced when his position was secure. Security walked him out through the same lobby where Rachel had been terminated 72 hours earlier. His hands were cuffed. His face was red. His mouth was moving, but the shouting stopped mattering somewhere between the doors and the parking lot. Staff members watched. Some pulled out phones. The perp walk went viral within 6 hours. Respected physician in handcuffs, legacy erased in a single afternoon, dragged past the very nurses' station where he had humiliated temps for sport, where he had publicly questioned their competence, where he had built his authority on their silence. The rubber soles of security boots squeaked against the tile. That sound followed him out. Rachel Torres stood in a conference room window on the 4th floor, watching him go. Her face was neutral, the mask of composure she'd worn for 2 decades. But Mateo saw something the board members missed. He saw his mother's hand finally shake. Not from fear. Not from vindication. From relief. The kind that comes when you can finally put the weapon down. 2 years later, a community college classroom in a strip mall outside Atlanta. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the sound of institutional fluorescence everywhere. A CPR dummy lay on a folding table. Dr. Caldwell, no longer licensed, no longer doctor, legally just a man named Caldwell, positioned the dummy's head with hands that had once billed $400,000 in phantom consultations. His medical license was permanently revoked. His pension had been seized for restitution. His name appeared in medical ethics courses as a cautionary tale. 15 students sat in folding chairs, most of them there because their jobs required certification, not because they cared. He placed the dummy's chest beneath his palms. Compression should be at least 2 inches deep, he said. His voice had lost something. The authority was gone. What remained was just instruction. Just words. Just a man teaching basics in a room where nobody knew who he'd been. His hourly rate was $15. Meanwhile, at Marine Base Quantico, Master Chief Petty Officer Rachel Torres stood in dress blues in the front row of a change of command ceremony. The dress uniform was immaculate, ribbons in perfect order, shoes polished to the shine of still water, insignia precisely placed. Captain Marcus Torres, fully recovered, moving without the oxygen cannula that had been his companion for 6 months, assumed command of a training battalion. 300 Marines stood at attention as the colors were presented. Rachel's eyes tracked the ceremony with the precision of someone who had attended 1,000 of these formations. On her mantel at home, the worn combat boots from room 347, sitting beside the shadow box Mateo had carried into that conference room. Marcus had gift-wrapped the boots himself. The note attached read, "Lucky boots find their way to the right people. Thank you for finding us." After the ceremony, General Torres approached her. He was smaller in civilian clothes, somehow, though no less formidable. His daughter-in-law stood beside him, Marcus's wife, who had spent 3 weeks sleeping in a hospital chair while her husband recovered. "My son tells me you're training field medics now," the general said. "Teaching them the open-chest cardiac massage procedure." Rachel nodded. Someone should know it properly. He extended his hand. She took it. Then something happened that board members would have understood immediately. The general saluted her. A Marine general saluting a Master Chief, rank recognizing rank, respect transcending everything else. Mateo stood beside her, now 18 years old, now wearing the uniform of the Naval Academy with the awkwardness of a first-year midshipman who still didn't quite believe it was real. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm glad I brought those medals." Rachel looked at her son. She allowed the smallest smile. "So am I." The closing scene was a classroom at Norfolk Naval Station. 23 corpsmen sat in medical training seats, their attention fixed on the figure at the front of the room. Master Chief Petty Officer Rachel Torres held a laminated diagram of the human thorax. Her voice was steady and sure and carried the absolute weight of someone who had done this under fire. "You'll be terrified. Your hands will want to shake. Don't let them. Someone's life depends on what you do in the next 60 seconds. A young Marine, 19, from Kentucky, 3 weeks from his first deployment, raised his hand. "Master Chief, how do you stay calm?" She thought of room 347. She thought of the diner at 3 in the morning. She thought of her son's voice cracking in that conference room. She thought of the worn boots on her mantle. "You remember why you're there. The ones who have seen the worst often give the most." The young Marine nodded. He would carry that forward. All of them would. That was what mattered. That was what always mattered. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm curious, comment below and tell us if you're watching this alone or with family. Now let's see how this unfolds.